summer wine, but now on BBC One's Sally Magnusson is taking songs of praise to the Hebrides.
In the past few weeks, hundreds of people have been travelling across Europe en route to Ireland as part of an enormous celebration of Christianity's beginnings here in Britain 1400 years ago. And this weekend they've taken a substantial detour to include the tiny Hebridean island of Iona, just across the water there. They're all converging on Iona this weekend, by ancient Irish rowing boat, by modern Irish helicopter bearing the Republic's president, and by more conventional means. Last week we joined the Pilgrims as they travelled north through England. This weekend they've been crowding onto this small ferry that plies its way rather choppily across the Sound to Iona. They're making the journey because 1400 years ago a strong-willed monk called Columba also journeyed across the sea to Iona. He may have been out of favour with the superiors in Ireland, but the influence of the community he founded here has been felt all over the world. And because of that influence, the church has claimed Columba as a saint, possibly the greatest saint in Scotland's history. The crowds surging up from the pier to the Abbey this weekend include people who've spent the whole of the last month on the road. They've retraced the story of Augustine, Columba and other saints. But what are they looking for? Author and playwright Murray Watts has written a screenplay about Columba.
Columba is one of the greatest figures who has ever lived, in my view. Although there's a lot that's lost in the mists of legend and history, what we do know is that he came here as an act of penance. And that turning from self-interest, I think, that has spoken to me. I think it's spoken to many people down the generation. It moved me. I think there was a lot of sorrow and struggle in my own life at the time I came to work on the screenplay, and bereavements and frustrations and personal anguish. And coming here to this place was a place of confrontation for me. People talk about the peace of Iona. There is peace here, but there's immense struggle as well in the life of Columba and in this place.
All the people, though, that pour into Iona as pilgrims, looking for Columba, looking for themselves, they all seem to have different ideas about what they're hoping to find. Does that matter, do you think?
Where you start from is not the issue. It's where your destiny is. And I think Columba, actually, when he came here to Iona, probably had many mixed motives. I think what happened to him during the time he was here was profound. I think what can happen to anybody who comes on this particular journey, and not just to the physical Iona, but to any place of confrontation with God in the stillness, that they may well find themselves landing up in a place they didn't expect.
As the burial place of Scots kings, Iona has attracted people right down the centuries. In 1773, Dr. Johnson came to inspect what was then the ruined abbey. And 150 years ago this summer, the royal yacht with Queen Victoria and Prince Albert on board anchored here after a dramatic visit to nearby Fingal's Cave. Iona was the highlight of fashionable 19th century excursions. But the island is more than just a tourist attraction. It's a Hebridean crofting community with its own school and parish church. Someone who's at the heart of that community, but also dealing daily with the needs of the tourists, is Crawford Morrison, church elder and Iona's postmaster. Tell me, what do islanders feel about this whole Columba industry? You know, the pilgrims, the tourists, the nosy film crews.
It's really fairly amiable, I would say, because we realise it's our bread and butter in the tourist season, and we still feel that we have a life of our own, particularly in the winter when it's quieter. People can see more of each other, and there's a very strong community spirit among the island people.
St. Columba may be a popular image for a postage stamp, but who exactly was the real Columba? Gilbert Marcus is a Dominican monk and a historian.
There are lots of stories about Columba. The 9th abbot of Iona says that he came here as a monk, as a pilgrim for Christ. This was a Gaelic-speaking, Irish-speaking part of the country, and the vast majority of people were probably already Christians. The Picts were just over the hills and on the eastern side of the country. But there's very little evidence that Columba came to preach Christianity to them. He did visit them, and he may have encountered some missionary opportunities, but he didn't come here to do that.
What makes it so difficult to get to the real Columba is that he seems to be appropriated by every cause under the sun, all down through the ages.
Adamnan begins the process, in fact, in the 7th century. He appropriates Columba for his own political purposes, and he's appropriated later on. He becomes the patron saint of Scotland. His relics are moved in the 9th century to Dunkeld. He's a protector of Scotland. His relics are later on carried into battle. Maybe today he's more often reappropriated for Christianity with an ecological edge to it, for example. And the quite proper concern that Christians have for the natural environment is given a new depth with the imagery borrowed from Columba's legend. For him, nature was the place he lived. It wasn't the place he went to on a bank holiday weekend for a day out in the heather. And I think the challenge for us that is presented by Columba is to some extent to find God in the places we live, which may be on the factory floor, it may be in some stuffy office, it may be wherever.
I will always bless the Lord, praise his name and love his word. Humble folk will fill with joy, as in God I glory. When I prayed, God answered me. From my fears he set me free. None who trust God's faithful love shall be disappointed. Those who cry are listened to. Those in need receive their due. Angels guard God's loyal foe, keeping them from danger. Praise and sing that God is good. No good is wrong but sure. Find the truth in
Princes may suffer hardship and go hungry, but those who wait on the Lord shall lack no good thing.
Columba and his fellow monks arrived in Iona after a voyage from Ireland, a relatively common journey in the 6th century. And this week, across the water there on the coast of Northern Ireland, they're preparing to do it again in the wake of Columba.
1, 2, 3, let's go!
Whoa!
Right, slower, slower, slower.
The boat that we're using for this voyage is a 37-foot curragh, which is a traditional Irish boat, and she was built in Kerry a few months ago. The reason for the journey is to bring together people from the various religious backgrounds in Ireland, and that's reflected in the crew. In researching the voyage, it has been very interesting for us to see that in the days of Columba there was division, and really many of the situations that we find today in Ireland were reflected in his day. And we would like to be involved and take a stand in his tradition and be counted as people who are prepared to work towards reconciliation in this country.
One of the crew is Joanne Hogg, who sings in a band called Iona.
Well, the first time that I heard about this trip, I immediately felt excited. I've been to Iona once, and my first experience of Iona was not memorable for good reasons, because it was a very wet, cold November day, and there was a TV crew there, and I didn't have any space or time by myself there. And I think for me, this is my opportunity to make my voyage to Iona, and I can't think of a more appropriate way to do it than actually to go the same way that Colmcille, as he's known in Ireland, went there. It's about 7 years now since I became part of the band that takes its name after the island, Iona. And that whole period of Christianity and the lives of the saints of that time has inspired us, and inspired many of the songs that we've written.
Sand as white as snow swirls like smoke around my feet, and a sky that turns in a moment from blue to gray. All these things I see on an Irish day. It is here that time has granted that the light should still burn on. It was here a seed was planted in the brave heart of an Irish son.
For hundreds of years, the Abbey at Iona lay in ruins until it was rebuilt in 1938 under the leadership of George MacLeod, who at the time was a minister in one of Glasgow's poorest areas. And the Abbey is now just one of many Iona community centres throughout the world.
Be with you now and stay with you.
Christine Carson has worked in an inner-city parish in Guatemala. Now she's the Abbey's music leader.
Deep peace of the quiet earth to you.
Community life is by no stretch of imagination a cushy number. When you put 50 people together from different parts of the world, with different personalities, with different ideas, different theologies, then we have to learn about how each other works, how each other thinks.
What's interesting about the community here is that you seem to come in order to go.
There's no point in coming to stay because you come here to have your world widened, to have your vision widened, and your sense and your reality of God widened. So you can never go from here the same person. You go here as part of your journey to continue the gospel story in your own life.
Every week, the Iona Community organises a pilgrimage for its Abbey guests round some of the historic sites on the island. The community's leader is Norman Shanks.
Well, this is St. Columba's Bay, where St. Columba is supposed to have landed when he came with his followers from Ireland in 563. Behind us is the hill of the Back to Ireland, and Columba is supposed to have climbed that, and once he established that he couldn't see Ireland, he knew that this was the place where he was going to settle. This is the point where the pilgrimage comes on Wednesday, and those who are taking part are invited to reflect on the point that they've reached in their own lives. And as for Columba, this place symbolised a new beginning. So people are encouraged to think about what they want to leave behind in their own lives.
And that's when you get them to pick up a pebble.
Well, the pebble is thrown into the beach as a symbol of what people leave behind. And people move on from here, move on to the mainland when they leave Iona, just as the Iona community's work is not limited to this place, but is going on elsewhere from our Glasgow basin, wherever our members are.
So that again is your idea of the pilgrim. The pilgrim doesn't stop, the pilgrim goes
The
back
pilgrimage
out.
goes on. Our journey is a journey through life. Our little pilgrimage here is just part of a much bigger pilgrimage.
just felt that this was a place to make a pilgrimage all the way from the United States to Rome to Iona.
The thing about it's been the surprises. We've never known, we roughly know where we're going, but we've never known who we're going to stay with, what was going to happen next, and it was just full of surprises, and I think that was God surprising us.
After singing with us yesterday afternoon, the pilgrims moved on to the final stage of their journey to Ireland. But in contrast to their quiet departure, this morning saw the rather more dramatic arrival of President Mary Robinson of the Republic of Ireland, making her own pilgrimage and joining this morning's worship in the Abbey.
Come all you people, come and praise your Maker. Come all you people, come and praise your Maker. Come all you people, come and praise your Maker. Come now and worship the Lord. Come all you people, come and praise your Maker. Come all you people, come and praise your Maker. Come all you people, come and praise your Maker. Come now and worship the Lord. Come all you people, come and praise your Maker. Come all you people, come and praise your Maker. Come all you people, come and praise your Maker. Come now and worship the Lord. Come and praise your Maker. Come all you people, come and praise your Maker. Come all you people, come and praise your Maker. Come all you people, come and praise your Maker. Come now and worship the Lord. Come and praise your Maker. Come all you people, come and praise your Maker. Come all you people, come and praise your Maker. Come all you people, come and praise your Maker. Come now and worship the Lord. Come and praise your Maker. Come all you people, come and praise your Maker. Come all you people, come and praise your Maker. Come all you people, come and praise your Maker. Come now and worship the Lord.
President Robinson, is there a sense in which you feel that you're following Columba to Iona as a pilgrim?
Yes, very much so, particularly because yesterday I was in Donegal in Gartan, in his birthplace, where he is revered as St. Columkill. And then I went to Derry and was welcomed by the 4 church leaders, the Catholic and Church of Ireland bishops and the leaders of the Presbyterian and Methodist community. They are good friends, and when I met people in Donegal and Derry, a number of them said, "Oh, we've been to Iona," or "You know that there's a curricle going, and it's very much going in an ecumenical spirit." And there was a great emphasis on that spirit of Columba being a figure honoured and revered by the different Christian denominations, and therefore very much a unifying figure. And so, yes, I have a sense of being in the steps as a pilgrim and also as a penitent. I think it's important to remember that Columba came as a penitent, and therefore we can regret the violence and the divisiveness.
You feel that? You feel
yes,
that
I do.
personally?
I do. I feel that it's a way of really seeing his relevance, that we have to be open to each other and create peace and reconciliation, lasting peace on the island of Ireland.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, because Columba's legacy has been claimed by all sorts of people for all sorts of purposes, from the profound to the dotty. I wonder what you feel his legacy is.
Well, I think it's twofold. It's that sense of a presence and a spiritual inspiration to the different Christian denominations, and for very good reason, in not only his work as a priest, but also in founding monasteries, but also his gifts to scholarship, to poetry. And now, in the context of the modern Ireland and the modern Scotland, it's a reminder of how ancient the links are, how many links there have been down the centuries, and that in the context of our membership of the European Union, Ireland and Scotland can look at each other. We've so much in common. We can learn from each other. We can share so much. And I think Columba very much symbolises that.
It's not just Christians for whom Columba and his pilgrimage hold an abiding fascination. For the playwright and musician John Purser, it's practically an obsession, and he's an agnostic.
Columba was a fascinating man. For a start, of course, he was a poet and a lover of poets, a defender of poets, and he was a beautiful singer. And as a musician and a poet, that draws me to him naturally from the start. For many years I've longed to find this island. Nainba is the old name for it. Columba is supposed to have come here on retreat, and nobody's been certain where it was. The old name means the Isles of the Sea, but has the other name Iluch na Níl, the Islands of the Saints. The most special thing about the island of all is the fact that the beehive huts survive here. These are dry stone dwellings where the monks would spend time in prayer and in thought and in singing as well in there. And there's two ruined beehive huts here with actually a little connecting passageway between them. So you could imagine a couple of monks in there and one of them getting a little lonely, and he'd sneak through to his friend next door and they'd have a little chat now and again. Of course, a great attraction about coming to an island like this and following the steps of a saint is the sense of journey. Journeys are exciting for a start. Of course, many people take them now in a way that doesn't have much significance. But a journey to a place like this has significance. You have to come over the sea. The island is uninhabited. So there is a sense of adventure, and there's also a sense of discovery. You're journeying back through time. I suppose some Christians might think it odd that an agnostic should go on a spiritual journey, but I find myself seeing death in front of me too, like anybody else, and also I see the beauty of the world eventually going from me. One way or another, I too need to be able to look beyond the here and now.
Celebrations of 1400 years of Christianity are nearly at an end. But here in Iona, Columba's Isle, the faith goes on, and the people here are committed to finding a shape for it that will sustain Christianity through the next millennium. Celtic spirituality and the tranquility of Iona, Songs of Praise next week moves into a rather different gear as Pam Rhodes joins Christians in Hong Kong.
That's absolutely right. Here I am, right in the middle of Hong Kong's business centre, and somewhere in the heart of all this lies St John's Anglican Cathedral, which will be full of hundreds of people and their songs of praise. We'll be flying high over the colony to see some of its far-flung outposts. We'll be up in the hills to meet Jackie Pullinger, one of the world's miracle workers. And I'll be talking to Chris Patten, Hong Kong's last governor, about the part his faith has played in his work here in Hong Kong. So join us next week for a Songs of Praise special from the heart of the Orient.
And that Songs of Praise is at the earlier time of 5:50.